Hello, everyone. I wrote down my introduction today because I wanted to make sure I did not mess this up, but welcome to a game that we're about to play called What Would You Do? Occult Edition. So basically, I have a bunch of scenarios here, and we are going to discuss what we would personally do for any given situation in terms of spell work and magic. And we hope with this panel that we can provide spell work information and show magical diversity with our different cultural backgrounds and experience. I personally am really, really excited with this panel that we put together because we have all sorts of cultures represented today. We're all over the world, different time zones right now. We've got all different genders present. We've got all different kinds of expertise. We've got ceremonial magic present, chaos magic, witchcraft, folk magic. We've kind of got it all. So I'm really excited to have this discussion today. And let's start by introducing ourselves and just kind of talking about our cultural backgrounds and what we're bringing to the table. And we'll start with Justin, the Witch of Enchantment. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Justin. I'm the Witch of Enchantment. I'm from Florida. I grew up in the church in a kind of Baptist cult, I would say. So a lot of my practice influences like Catholicism and saints, folk magic, Southern conjure, a little bit of hoodoo. And that's my vibe. So that's what my influences are.
Hey, I'm Aurora, and my YouTube channel is Lavender Hazelwood. So I consider myself a green and hedge witch. I primarily work with a lot of intuitive stuff and astral work, but also a lot of herbs and stuff too. So I guess I'm a solitary eclectic at this point.
Hey there, my name is Ysha. You might know me as the Activist Witch. My pronouns are she, they. I'm a non-binary, fat, queer, autistic witch living in Wales, but I was my background is all the superstition that my village had, and I never realized, I think this is witchcraft. I also am Alpha Egyptian, so there's some stuff that I'm trying to explore there. And mainly I talk about the intersection of witchcraft as rebellion, so as activism.
Hi, my name is Sanhre. I am the host of the Order of Chaos podcast and head teacher at the Order of Chaos Mystery School. I grew up in California. I was practicing Levian Satanism from 15 until my early 30s, and then I branched off into Hermeticism and then chaos magic. And now I practice what I'm sort of loosely calling chaos witchcraft, as it is distinct from chaos magic, because I'm not an atheist.
Hello, everybody. My name is Aster. I am a Brazilian folk practitioner. Grew up in Brazil, born and raised, and I have a lot of African Brazilian influences in my craft, especially coming from my mother's family. And I currently live in France, so my practice is a huge mixture of Afro-Brazilian influences and a little bit of European witchcraft. So yeah, there you go.
Hi, I'm Bente. I am on YouTube as the Norse Witch. I'm originally from like the northernmost part of Germany at the Danish border. And yeah, with that, I also have like a lot of Scandinavian roots. So my practice is, I would call it low magic with a very big emphasis on Scandinavian practices, both pre-Christian as well as Scandinavian folk magic. Yeah, that would be that.
And I'm Astra. I'm a ceremonial magician who focuses on Solomonic magic. My expertise really falls in the Grimoire tradition, so that's mostly what you will hear me talk about today.
Astra being our token ceremonial magician out of all of us, like folk chaos practitioners. So hello, everybody. I'm Ivy Corvus. If you're not already familiar with who I am, I'm a chaos magician first and foremost, but I'm also a witch, a psychic, a shamanic practitioner. I have a little bit of history with ceremonial magic and Zen Buddhism that really helps shape my current practice. I think the Zen Buddhism part really kind of plays a role in my perspective of just how I work with magic in general. So those are my influences. I'm so excited to start this panel. So I wanted to start it out pretty easy. We're going to kind of ease in because I know a lot of us are nervous before I hit the record button. We're all a little nervous to do a really big panel like this. So go easy on us in the comments, okay? Also, feel free for anybody watching this video to play along. If you have something different that you would do for spell work, please put it in the comments below. But we're going to start out with our first category, which is protection, because I feel like it's very simple to like ease all of us into a discussion like this. So the first scenario, if you all are ready, is You moved into a brand new house and you are wanting to set up some sort of home protection for the very first time at this new location. What is the first thing that you do? And if there are a couple things, feel free to elaborate.
Okay, I guess I'll just start out. I guess I was trying not to speak into someone else. Okay, so I think the first thing that I would do in a new house would be to first of all establish a connection to the house spirit. That would be very, very important because I think that spirit will be like your primary spirit for any kind of protection for the house, because of course it's also in their interest in their interest to protect the house and everyone living there. So that would be the first thing that I would do, like setting out like a little bit of porridge with like butter or something. That's like a traditional thing to do in northern Germany and also in various parts of Scandinavia. Then I would probably, because I'm basically solving like 5 million things with bind runes, so I would probably like, I have like one specific bind rune that I use for home protection, so I would definitely draw that on every single wall and like empower those, of course. Yeah, and then I guess it depends on the house, where it is, what the surrounding area is, because if it's like in an area where there are a lot of spirits around that are maybe like a little bit troubled, if there's maybe like a big cemetery around or something like that, then I would probably put out some spirit traps, like a little like, I don't mean like a literal witch's broom, but like these like outgrowths of birch trees. They're called witch's brooms, so that you can put up those as a spirit trap, or like a hagstone also works as a spirit trap, something like that. And then yeah, probably like tiny things like strings of rowan berries or something like these typical things.
Okay, so moving into a new house, first thing I would think of would be smudging with some herb, probably guinea hen weed. That's the name that I was trying to remember when we had a call, Ivy. It's a little bit weird, but anyway. Over here in France, I can't find it, so I usually I substitute it for juniper, which is also very good. And then I would add wards, especially plants. Like for example, snake plant is a big one, dumbscane, rue. That would be, yeah, I have all of them all around the house. Also spell bags, jars of salt and garlic, those little things spread around the house. Yeah, that would be the first things I would do.
Okay, so for me, let me first say that I've lived in 2 very haunted houses and I will not do that again. So if I were to get the sense that that's was going on in the house, that would be an absolute no-go for me. But let's say the house isn't haunted, okay? Start from right there. Then I would paint on, and just a little bit of, you know, I wouldn't tell my landlord or anything, but I would paint on all the doors, Thurisaz, Tiwaz, and Thurisaz in that order, kind of like what Bente was saying. I wouldn't do it as a binder, and only because I've been doing it this way for so long. And then I would just sprinkle a little bit of salt into the paint before it dried. And that's been working. That's what I have on the back of my black mirror, and it's worked so well that I now use it for everything.
To move into a new property, I would, what I have done is make my own smoke bundle, usually with lavender and rosemary, and then walk around the perimeter of the property 3 times with extreme focus around each inch. If I lose focus, then I go around another time, just so that I know that my energy has permeated the property. And then I stand at the front of the property and I imagine a shield going over the whole house. So that's the first thing that I generally do.
In my case, when I moved to this house last year, I had just started practicing. So yeah, the first thing was smoke cleansing for me as well. And then actually I owe to Astra the entire way that I ward my house, which is very, very functional, never betrayed me. So I trust the methods of the ceremonial magician in that. And it's basically, yeah, reciting a certain psalm always with some materia. Like I can't do the perimeter of my house. I wish I could, Aurora, because it's in between other houses. But I make sure that every corner is covered with some color. Yeah, that's my way.
I just realized I didn't even think about the fact that the house may have like a garden, because like I've never lived in a proper house. I've only ever lived in flats. But since I may move into a house this year, I would probably also check out all of the trees that are around the house, figure out if there is one specific, because usually there's like one specific tree that's mostly like the biggest tree, or like there are specific trees that are usually like kind of like guardian trees. They have like this one specific spirit that looks out for the area. So I'll probably also check out that one, try to figure out which one it is and like give it an offering and stuff. And plant specific plants around the house. So like stinging nettle would be like a classic one, or like bramble, or
Speaking about trees, I love that Binya, that you said that. And I have a big oak tree that's outside of my house. So that's something I love to do when I move into a new place, is to really get to know the nature and the plants. I'm a big squirrel lover, so I like to give offerings to the squirrels, and I ask for their protection. Aurora knows about that. So that's something that I love to do. I also really like to get to know the history of where I'm moving to in the area. If I live in a townhouse now, I've lived here for like 7 years. I want to know when it was built, what it was like before I moved here, what was here before I moved here. The first thing that I typically do when I move in is I make a mixture with some herbs and ammonia and urine. And I like to do a floor wash. It smells terrible, but it's just what I like to do. And it works fantastic. And then as far as like overall protection, I like to anoint red ribbon, and I will put it in my windows or along the doors, things like that. I also like casteria, and I like to write on my walls the Psalms. Crazy person like that. So those are some of the things that I do when I move into a new place.
So my process for moving into a new home is threefold. The first thing that I will do, something that Benta mentioned, was connecting with your house spirit. I initially do that through just a really deep clean of the home if possible. And then I have a house blessing that I perform that is very Solomonic inspired, and uses candles, and it's rather complicated, but it takes about a day. After that, I have a active protection that I put around the home, which is using a homemade fiery wall protection oil, consecrated to St. Michael with a couple other spirits involved. And then I also have a passive one that I put outside my door, and usually outside like any windows. It's a Babylonian incantation bowl. You may have heard of it before, but generally speaking, it's a clay bowl, and you write an incantation or like a psalm or some kind of ritual script of a sort that will it acts as a spirit trap. And so anything that comes to your home that is not welcome will be taken into that bowl. If it breaks, you can dispose of it and put a new one in. That's just kind of a passive way to keep things out that I don't want to be there.
So just something that is different between like Benta and Astra, and like my culture, we don't actually do house spirits. We don't have that kind of belief. I never learned that from my mother or anything. So I tried to do it over here, but I don't know, I didn't feel it. I didn't get that connection. So that's something, just different between cultures. And I thought it would be a good idea to mention, because not everybody has that reference of house spirits.
So I'm going to attempt to go last in answering all these questions, because obviously I wrote the prompts, and I think it's only fair that I go last, because I do have things I would like to say, but I'd like everyone to have a chance to speak first. But I do the same thing as a lot of you, especially Benta. When you talked about the first thing that you do is connect to the house spirit, same thing. I go into the house, I sit in the middle. Usually it's like the living room floor, or if there's like a fireplace or something, wherever the heart of the home is, I go and I sit on the floor, and then I typically do a long meditation. I introduce myself to the house spirit, and I just want to establish that connection before I start making changes, because I want all the changes to go smoothly. And then I open all the windows and doors, I smoke cleanse everything, get everything the hell out, because I don't know what else is in there, and just push it all out. Then I shut everything up, and then put a bunch of sigils all over the doors and windows. But I guess one thing that's different that I, after listening to you all, that I do is that I have war water that I use. So I will go around the perimeter of my property at Justin. I will take my war water, and usually with like a sprig of rosemary, because I love working with rosemary for various things. And I'll just flick the war water around the perimeter of my property, just visualizing this barbed wired fence kind of coming up around the whole thing. It is a fortress, ain't nothing getting through that. So that is what I typically do. So we're gonna go into the next category, which is spirit work. I actually had a couple questions under protection. We might like circle back to those, but I think everybody's like sufficiently warmed up. So let's get into more medium questions. And then I've got some really spicy questions coming afterwards. So I'm really excited for that. But moving up in territory, you come across a spirit and you have no idea what it is, but you want to try to connect with it further. How do you establish this connection, not knowing who it is that you're talking to or what? Ysha, why are you laughing?
So here's the thing. One thing that I might be known for is that I am not great at spirit communication. I'm working on it, but I'm not great. My wife, however, has a very natural attitude to that. And it has happened during some spell work, which was in a circle, was supposedly protected, but I was at the beginning, so it wasn't. My wife at some point sits up and is like, no, we're not sitting up because I can't look in the mirror because there's something that has told me not to look in the mirror. And she had a proper visual and everything. In this case, thankfully, I had a wife that has a talent for this, so she communicated via pendulum, and we learned that scary as this figure looked, because it was just like a girl with hair on her face, and it was a bit dark and all. She was just curious, like she realized that we were doing magic, and she just came, and it was literally at the borders of the circle, but evidently I wasn't powerful enough, or I don't know, the circle didn't push to the limit of the room. So yeah, that's I would strongly advise to have some form of communication or divination that you're comfortable with, so you can actually find out and if anything, part as friends.
I have control issues. So if I don't know who you are, you gotta go. That's just how I am. That's probably like the religious trauma in me. I don't want no one coming around that I don't. We're not doing it. So I'm very much about pushing that kind of energy out. I'm open to it in other ways. If another spirit that I'm familiar with is bringing something with them, I'm more open to that. But there has to be a middleman, just some weird energy or weird spirit that's roaming around. I'm not about that life. That's just not for me. No.
Justin's like, get out, get the F out.
Yeah, exactly. I have to agree with him because I also don't like to talk to spirits that I didn't invite, that I don't know who they are. I prefer not to, because you never really know. It could be something else, pretending that it's just a curious girl with hair on her face, So I prefer not to engage too much with spirits that I don't know, who are not accompanied by someone who I already know. So yeah, I'm not about that either.
Okay, I'm a little bit different. I'm a little bit reckless, I have to say. I'm not the most I'm not the most slow person when it comes to spirits. Like, I'm one of those people who's like, I will leave my wards down for new spirits as long as they're not maleficent towards me. Like, if they're neutral, or they want like positive things for me, or they don't care about me, then they may come in, and I don't know, I like spirits, so I'm open about that. But I would still be very cautious about it, because it could be anyone. You don't know, so you have to, of course, figure it out first thing, and then see, okay, do I want the spirit here or not. But since I usually always have like protections on me as well as on my house, like, I'm not that bothered by it. But what I do is I would just like straight up go into communication and just ask various different things and like try to figure out what their deal is, like what are they doing here? Why are they here? What is their like a purpose? What are their feelings towards me and things like that. But I try to do that in a way where I still keep a little bit of distance. So I do a lot of spirit communication, but I have various different ways to do it, and some are, or they feel more close to the spirits than others. And one thing that I do when I don't want to get too close to a spirit is to basically do like a pendulum communication just with my hands, because I feel energies. So I can basically do a yes or no, like tap my hand yes, tap my hand no, and then do that kind of thing. That kind of, to me personally, feels safer than doing like I don't know, a black mirror or something like that, because there I'm opening myself up much more. So that way I can vet them a little bit and then see where to go from there. And if I'm bothered by the spirit, or I don't know, we just don't vibe, I would probably banish them. And if not, I'm like, okay, then you can stay here. Oh, and by the way, I would probably bribe the spirit, because like they don't have to tell me the truth. So before we would go into communication, I would probably be like, here, have a glass of water. If you are truthful and honest to me, then you can have it. Otherwise, fuck off. So yeah, that would probably be what I would do.
I'm like a couple of you said, I'm most willing to connect to spirits that I know, which generally fall in the realm of ancestors, like ancestors that I've known, or ancestors that I've known. When it's a new spirit that I'm coming in contact with, usually what I do is I feel them out with my spidey senses. So I ask myself, first of all, hey, does this feel okay? Like, is anything off here? Most of the time, I should say, like, I don't get crazy vibes. Sometimes I get weird vibes. If it's weird, I don't go near it. I'm like, you gotta go. That's it. We're not dealing at all. If it's neutral or benign, then I'm like, yeah, cool. Okay, let's interact. No big deal. It's important to me to be able to feel like I do have control in this situation. So, so often I am much more comfortable going to them. If they come to me in the astral realm, or usually that's when it is, then that's often where my spidey senses kick in, and I'm really using sort of my, I don't know, antenna to feel out who they are and what their vibe or jam is. But if I go to a cemetery or something and I start interacting with spirits there, like, I'm happy to have a conversation. I don't feel intimidated at all. Like, I'm sitting there cleaning their gravestone or whatever, and they're popping out like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, cool, and it's fine. And I have absolutely no problem with that, because the context feels relevant.
So the vast majority of spirits that I work with, which is only maybe less than a dozen, I was introduced to by Thoth. So that's a good system for me. But I also have, I essentially have my aura programmed in a way that only spirits that I would vibe with are going to get through. Now, that being said, many years ago, I was meditating and something introduced itself to me and called itself Orion, and I jumped out of my chair and I was like, oh no, get the fuck out of here. But I was young at the time, and I regret that, because I don't think it was malevolent. I think I was young and it scared me.
Okay, so this question has two aspects for me. The first is, when it comes to spirits in my home, if I have not called you into my home, you are not allowed in my home, and I will banish you without a second thought. But that's simply because this is my space. That being said, when we're out and about, we encounter spirits, and that's kind of a natural part of existence. And when that happens, there are two ways I go about this. I have fortunately curated a spirit in my team that can compel other spirits to tell the truth, which is excellent, saves me a lot of effort. And so if I encounter a spirit in the wild, I will essentially call that spirit on my team, kind of introduce them and be like, this is why they're here. And then I will ask questions like, what is your name? What is your purpose? Where do you fall within a hierarchy of spirits? All of those kind of things. What can you help with? Why are you here? Stuff like that. Before I had that spirit curated, I had to kind of do a more roundabout system where it was, let me try and learn some of the basic elements of the spirit. Do you align with a particular element? Are you part of a particular system? If it's like a genus loci spirit, for example, there are spirits within the genus loci that are like higher on the food chain, quote unquote. And so you could appeal to them to encourage the spirit to tell the truth. Or if they're elemental in nature, you could appear to the kings and queens of like the elemental worlds to compel them to tell you the truth and the questions that you asked. There have been instances where a spirit will appear and I attempt to communicate and they cannot communicate back. that has happened. In that case, I usually encourage the spirit to leave some kind of tangible thing, whether it be dirt, a rock, a flower, something. And I will take that back with me, and I will then scry and allow them to speak to me through like visuals versus communication. And we'll go through the same kind of questioning that we would have if they could actually speak. But that's how I would do it.
Much like Benta, I am incredibly reckless, and one of these days it's probably going to get me into trouble. So if there's a spirit that comes by, I'm like, ooh, who are you? Let's find out. But also, as Sanhre said, like I have my energetic aura, or I have this protective shield around me and around my house that really no malevolent spirit is going to be able to get in the first place. So I'm not really too worried about that. But if I am out and about outside of my house and I'm encountering a spirit that I don't really know what it is, I usually go off the vibe first, you know, is this giving me good vibes or not? And then I can make a decision if I want to continue interacting. If I do decide to interact, I usually go with tarot cards. So what I do is I sit down and I start talking to the spirit, and I say, you are allowed to tap me on the hand, but you are not allowed to harm me. And then I sit down with my tarot cards, and it is my belief that each tarot card carries a specific flavor of energy. And so I can pull some cards with that spirit and have a conversation with it. But it's so interesting because I find the more, how do I even explain this? When spirits are coming to me and wanting to work with me, the moment that I turn around and say, yeah, let's do it. Who are you? Let me study you. They fucking run away, which really irritates me. And so I think it's actually one of the most efficient banishing methods ever. If you have something come at you and they're bothering you, just say, oh, you want to stalk me? Well, babe, I'm going to stalk you right back. And then you just try to study it and it goes away. So that's been my experience. Anyways, don't do as I do because, like I said, I am very reckless. Not the best idea.
I would like to add something to what you just said, because I kind of feel like a lot of spirits really like to just like be a little bit tricksy around people because they are not used to being recognized and they're not used to people being able to communicate. So it's like, well, if you were a spirit and nobody can sense you and see you, wouldn't you, like, I don't know, slap someone's butt from time to time? But like then all of a sudden someone can actually sense you and is like, I see what you're doing there. So yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
That's what I'm saying. The moment that you turn around and really try to study the spirit, poof, they're gone. They don't want to be studied. They don't want to be observed and looked at. So yeah, so funny. Oh gosh. Okay, so moving into another spirit work question that kind of goes in line with what we've been talking about. Oh, Sanhre,
I want to add one more thing to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
If it's all right. And you know, this is funny because you'll see this in an upcoming podcast, and it's in all the old ones. The goetic spirits, like, they are around me and like to be up in my space. I don't really have a whole lot of desire to work with them, but over and over and over again, they interfere with what I'm doing, but not in a malicious way at all. Just kind of in like, hey, pay attention to us. Hey, pay attention to us, kind of way. And I find it annoying. And so I haven't really reached out, except for Boone, who I've asked for favors before. But yeah, I just think that's kind of a weird. I don't know why. I don't know what the distance is between me and them, but I'm just not feeling it.
Fair enough. Okay, so the next prompt is, oh no, a spirit is in your house that you do not want to be there. So let's pretend all of your protections have failed, because I know a lot of us are more experienced practitioners to where nothing's really getting in the first place. Let's say there's a freak of nature and a spirit does manage to get into your house. It is malevolent. It's dealing a lot of strife and trouble in your life. How do you personally kick this spirit out? How do you go about banishing something from your space?
So I have two ways of dealing with it. First one, if you can't beat it, unite with it. So I propose a partnership. You know what? You got to stop what you're doing there. How about we become friends? And it has worked. It has worked before. So that's something you can try. Let's be friends, why not? Yeah, it's something that could surprise you in the end. But if that doesn't work either, I call for help. I call for my team and let's get this fucker out of here, because so these are my strategies.
I second that. I phone a friend. That's my favorite my favorite thing to do is to phone a friend. I also, even before I phone a friend, I very much approach magic like if I don't acknowledge where it's coming from, then I feel like it in some way loses its power. So if I feel like there's a spirit, fucking shit up, if I don't acknowledge it or if I take accountability for those mistakes, I do feel like it's probably just a mental thing, but I feel like it takes away some of their ability to actually take hold in my space and what I'm doing. If that doesn't work, then I go to Hecate or do workings with Saint Barbara and just have cut the bitch down. That's how I feel. Just take them out.
For me, there's kind of a three-tiered level of like intensity that I have to handle this with. The first is doing something that I learned from a magician named Scott Stenwick. And he has this idea of creating like fields based upon different uses of the lesser banishing rituals of the pentagram and the hexagram. So in this case, I would do the banishing field first, and that would include the LBRP and the LBRH, and doing that with a specific incense one that was given to me by a friend. That's usually good enough to clear like most spirits that like don't really have any power. Then I will move next to usually St. George. He is my like, if you don't get the fuck out of here, I'm gonna like royally fuck your shit up. And if that doesn't work, then I have some more intense spirits on my spirit team who will quite literally grab a spirit by the ears, the equivalent of that, and like kick them out. So there's kind of a tiered system. In my experience, anything that is able to get through is usually taken care of by one of the first two. I rarely have to actually include my spirit team.
I would agree to the tiered or to a tiered system. So first of all, I don't necessarily think that every spirit that comes in and like is a little bit annoying or something is necessarily targeting it against me. So the first thing I would probably do is try to figure out what their deal is again, because I kind of feel like sometimes they're just trying to get attention so that they can get help. And in that case, I wouldn't have to banish them. I can just help them with whatever they are trying to do. Or if it's, for example, a spirit that isn't even aware that it's a spirit or something, I can try to help it instead of banishing. But if I, through that, figure out, okay, either the spirit is not interested in communication, or it is actually just, I don't know, intending harm towards my way or something, then I would try to banish. And I guess the first thing that I would do is use a specific incense blend with, for example, juniper. I would probably put like stinging nettle in there, valerian root, yeah, specific kinds of herbs. Probably I would also throw some garlic in there or something like that. And then try to get rid of it myself by just like smoking the entire space and doing like some kind of chant or like some kind of incantation. If that doesn't work, then I would also get some spirits in to help. So either the house spirit, and if the house spirit can handle it, then I would maybe ask my ancestors, and if my ancestors can handle it, then I would get in like Thor, for example, because I'm a heathen, so I can ask some deities to help, and I guess no spirit would like fuck with Thor. So Thor would be probably my last avenue.
Yeah, I have a similar approach. I have bundles that I make once a year of wild garlic, which I happen to have here. Those stink like little herbs, but they do the job. Next, I would go to my grandparents, as in ancestors, but also the house is very crucial to me. Like the first deity that I ever worked with, and is my patron deity, is Vesta, which is the goddess of the earth and house of the Roman pantheon. So I guess, yeah, like usually between the garlic and my grandparents and Vesta, I have so far sorted it out.
Okay, just fair warning here. My answer is gonna sound like what it is, so it's totally made up chaos magic nonsense, but it works. I would make a trap. I would make the trap by drawing a pentagram on the floor of the basement of my house. And if you're familiar with the shape of a toroidal sphere, which is the electromagnetic sphere around every atom or person or anything, it has a vacuum quality to it. So you can program that to work as a vacuum to draw the spirit to it. And then what I would do from there is like this uber lazy version of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. In fact, it's not even an uber lazy version of it. It's like a total just, I don't know what to call it, but I would essentially draw the pentagram in the air and trap the thing in the center of it and then just push it away. And I would always envision it just going like all the way to China or Australia or some shit and down into the ocean as far away from me as fucking possible. And that's worked pretty well. There was one time when I encountered a spirit that scared the piss out of me. I was doing tarot for a friend's shop, and they had some practitioner had sent some kind of servitor after this person that was so malevolent that it made all the hair stand up on the back of my neck. And I asked it very politely to leave and said, I have no problem with you. I'm just the tarot reader. Please leave my house. And it did. So thank God for that.
So I gotta be honest, I haven't encountered like really malevolent spirits. But if they are weird, they just have a weird vibe, I just tell them to go. I simply am like, you're not allowed to be here, go. That's it. I just done. So it's really simple and for me and so far and straightforward.
Also, I have to say, Benta just put in chat. I just want to share everyone in China, the poor Chinese people getting all of Sanhre's banished spirits. That's really rude of you, Sanhre. How dare you? Oh my gosh.
I mean, Australia too.
Yeah, Australia. What are you doing? Send them to the bottom of the ocean. Hopefully there's no people there. I don't know.
As if the Australians didn't have enough dangerous animals.
I know. That's so true. Oh my gosh. Well, everything you guys said is exactly what I would do as well. I usually start with a big smoke out, a really big smoke cleansing, because I find that is as simple as that is, it really does get rid of just so much stuff depending on the correspondences that you're using. Like, I don't have to do usually a big banishing ritual, but I will say if it is a really malevolent spirit, which first of all, I feel like that's a very rare occurrence. I mean, I have tried to get myself into trouble many times, like on purpose, trying to run into these creepy malevolent spirits because I want to study them. I'm fascinated by it. And then they just, like I said, they just end up running away from me. And I think it's just the lack of fear. Sometimes, now I got to go on a rant for a second. Sometimes I wonder if malevolent spirits just feed off fear. And because I don't have any fear, they're like, fuck that, I'm out. This girl doesn't have any fear to feed me. And Justin says she is the drama. Yeah. I am the drama, absolutely. But yeah, I think that stopping fear first and foremost, so they can't feed off that fear, is really important. Sometimes completely ignoring the spirit is really helpful. And then sometimes, like I said, turning around and trying to stalk it will really creep it out enough to go. Also, I bang pots and pans around my house. I don't give a shit. I'm just banging things like, get the F out of my house. And then as you guys said, the hierarchy I think is really important too. Like when you're working with a spirit and you want to kick it out, finding a bigger spirit to help you with that is helpful, like a deity or whoever it is that you're working with.
So I have one very big experience with that. When I first started out spirit work, I think that maybe I was feeling a little bit afraid because we are taught to fear spirits our entire lives. So when I started, maybe I was a little bit scared of what I was doing. Anyway, something very weird came up to my corridors. It was outside of my flat. It wouldn't get inside, I'm guessing because of the protections I had, but it was lurking around in the outside of my apartment. And that energy was awful. It was, I couldn't sleep at night. It was really very weird. And I tried everything. I started small, let's say. I used sigils, I used smudging, cleansings in the corridors. I used bells, I used salt, I used everything you can imagine. I used the banishing, like with the pentagram, I forgot how it's called. Anyway, I used everything I could find. And this spirit would go away for a little while each time that I would try to get it off of there, but then it would come back like a week later or so. So the situation was getting really out of hand. And then I decided to unite with it. I started giving it offerings. You know what? Let's sit down and have a conversation here. if you let me sleep, you see this that I'm giving you? So if you let me sleep, I'm gonna get you more. And then I was never bothered again. It never bothered me again from the minute I started giving it offerings. And then sometime later, I moved out. I gave a final offering, and that was it. Never had any problems with it again. So yeah, that's my 50 cents about that.
Something I do want to mention is that there are times when a spirit you'll have an interaction with the spirit and you can't get rid of it for whatever reason. I think in that case, one of the most important things we can do is go to members of our spirit team and say, hey, I have this spirit. It's not leaving me alone. Do you know of a way to get rid of them? Because more often than not, like, they do have some formula. Half the time I don't really understand what they're asking, and then I do it and it works, and I'm like, okay, great. Like, I don't really care how it works, but what you told me worked. And so going to your spirits when you are out of ideas can be one of your greatest strengths as a magician, because they almost always have a solution for you.
I love what you said about fear and being scared, and like this sort of perspective that we view spirit as being above us. And I think when we can let that go, sometimes you just have to treat a spirit like a bully on the playground. Like the best thing you can do is just approach them head on. You can't like hunker down in fear. You just got to move forward. And I cuss like a sailor. I like cussing out spirits. I have no problem doing that. I feel like it's empowering. I like noise. I like all of that. And I think if we just realize that, well, from my perspective, we are more, the bitch in charge. You got to be the bitch in charge. What is it? The HBIC, head bitch in charge. Love that. And you just have to take that energy and own it. And I think we're just spirits having a human experience. I know that sounds foo-foo, but I do believe that. And I don't think you're better than me. That's just like how I approach it when it comes to spirit work, deity work, anything like that. I think your knowledge is more vast than mine, obviously, because of the plane we exist on right now and the plane they exist on is, you can't deny the differences in that. But at the same time, you're not better than me. That's how I feel.
Justin, I like that. And I wanted to say also, so when I did live in that haunted house, I got the impression, and this, I know this is a movie trope, okay, but whatever. Like I think it's true that thing did not know it was dead. It did not believe that it had passed on, and that we were intruding in its house. That's definitely the vibe that everybody living in that house. This is one of those big tall houses in San Francisco. So there was like 6 people living in there, and everybody knew that we wanted to fucking get out of there and find a new place. I chose to be homeless rather than live there, actually. But anyways, I wanted to mention, because I didn't say this, and it's what I teach in my course. Like, one thing that Harry Potter definitely got right is that laughter is an incredibly powerful banishing tool. If you can laugh at it, then it's, and that speaks to what you were saying about fear, Ivy. Yeah, because they do feed on fear. Astral parasites in particular that were not human entities at any given point, and this is just from my perspective, are going to literally feed on that fear and then generate more of it in you to feed itself. So if you don't give it that, it's going to starve and go away.
I also think sometimes when you have that fear, just adding on to that perspective, I think sometimes we will see things as malevolent or something being a spirit when it actually isn't that. Like exacerbating an issue and seeing it as something spiritual where it may just be mundane, and kind of steamrolling ahead into something that can be very toxic and volatile to yourself.
Totally. Yeah.
Oh yeah, agreed.
So we're moving on to a category of domination. So we're going to talk about, which is basically, for those watching, making someone else do something that they wouldn't initially do, therefore overriding their free will. So we're talking about domination spells now. The first scenario is your boss treats you like shit and you're tired of it. You've tried everything possible to work hard, make your boss like you. You've even tried spell work to improve your performance or how you appear to others. At this point, you want to demand respect and you want to be treated better at work. From a domination perspective, how would you do this? Or would you? Because we can always talk about the ethics too.
Yeah, I would not, for one thing. So I don't do any kind of magic that interferes with another person's free will. I just won't do it. In that specific scenario, also, I would go right into my boss's office and say, fuck you, and I would leave. So yeah, I wouldn't resort to magic to deal with that. But yeah, I have a really strong personal moral issue with interfering with anyone else's free will. I'm not saying this for anybody else. I'm not judging anybody else who does. I just don't feel right about doing it. And so I have not, and I don't imagine I ever will.
I think all magic has a form of domination over somebody and affects their will. That's just my perspective. Even if it's just like a money spell or searching for a job, I think if you're going to do a working, whatever you want to call it, to get the job that you want, in essence, you're preventing somebody else that may be more qualified for that position to get that job. So I think everything we do in magic, even in religion outside of spirituality, has some sort of effect on how other people live and other people's opportunity. That's just my own perspective. For me, I'm not big on domination work, but I'm not above it either. I am a big proponent of war water. I love war water. I will dip people's pens, things like that, into war water and return them back to work. I'm not above that. Domination oils, candles. I love doing candle workings for domination, but to me, it's a last resort thing. Like, to dominate is like end of the line. There's always, I think, a point when you're going to do any sort of domination or baneful magic that you are really trying to assess the situation outside of your own experience and try to get as much information as you can. Maybe you're just oversensitive, maybe you're not looking at it right, maybe you haven't taken the time to communicate with that person to see what actually is going on. Maybe you are at fault, maybe you're not. But really going through that list before you go all the way to domination and having who knows what kind of effects on somebody else's mental state, their life, or their livelihood.
Yeah, so I think that as with many things, the mundane comes before the magical. So, what Justin just said, first of all, try to talk to that person, wait for things to cool down a little bit, and try to have a conversation with them, see if you can reason with that person. Some people at work, like a boss, for example, they can be very difficult and complicated to deal with. And if that's the case, what I try to do first is take it up with my spiritual team, and I tell them the situation and ask them to look into it and see what they can do so things can be improved. So at least we can have peace and, continue working together, at least come to an understanding. Because spirits, at least in my team, I think spirits in general, they are very good at influencing thoughts and behaviors. So it can be very helpful to talk to your team if you're having problems with anybody. But if you must, something that I really like are puppets. There's nothing like a puppet. I'm just gonna drop that.
So in my case, going back to well before I ever practiced, I've always taken very actively signs from the universe, so I wouldn't completely discount, first of all, that, maybe that's not the place for me. In the past, I would have definitely considered that. When it comes to Baneful Magick in general, I resort to what is my version of Spoon's theory for magic, which is energy economics for me. I will always, always, always spend more energy to do a spell to make life better for me rather than worse for someone else. It's not so much a morality issue, it's genuinely a matter of economics. So I would definitely, if I've done all those spells to improve my performance and everything, there might be a place out there that it might be time for me to look for another job, because maybe all these things are getting to me from the universe, because that day I look on Monster and actually there's going to be something better coming in.
Yeah, so for me in general, I would do domination workings, but only like as a last resort. Like that's that, like in dangerous situations and things like that. So a situation like that with like just a coworker or a boss that's fucking me up, I wouldn't really, I don't know, that wouldn't be a case where I would do that. I would try to do other things instead, like maybe go in very early to the office and like make some like harmony spray or something, spray that around the office, see if that does something. Or like if not, maybe just banish that boss so that he gets, or they get another job so they can complain about someone else but not me. But if I was to do in general some kind of domination working, like as a last resort, one thing that I would try is weirdly specific. So in German, and I don't know if that saying also exists in English, but in German we have this saying, zittern wie Espenlaub, which basically means to like shudder like the leaves, like the foliage of an aspen tree, because they are always fluttering like this. So in my view, and it's also like a thing in at least Scandinavian folk magic, but I guess it also exists somewhere else, that you can engage with an aspen tree to make someone shudder out of fear until they do what you want. So I guess I would do something like that if I had to, but yeah, puppets would also be like the second thing that I would go to probably.
For me, I would handle this more. So I'm going back to the original prompt, which is that you have a bustle work and you try to do everything, sweeten them toward yourself, improve your own performance, all of these things, and nothing has worked. I'm a firm believer in performing magic with the most information possible. And so what I would do is dispatch essentially some aerial spirits and ask them to follow the individual and report back what is said and their circumstance. And the reason why I would want to know that is because it would give me an indication of whether the individual is going through like a hard time personally, or maybe they've got a lot going on. And so it's just like a bad time for them, in which case it's inappropriate to do any kind of domination magic because they're just really going through it. And that's a matter of like, okay, maybe I'm going to take some mundane actions to like walk beside them, treat them more kindly, like do things to enhance the relationship by kind of joining with them in their struggles. That being said, if that's not the case, then I would work with the spirit of my place of work. So this is something that I think people don't think about very much, but like you can derive the name and sigil of the spirit that rules your workplace. And if someone is treating you poorly without good reason, you can petition them to say, my work is good, you have seen it, you see how I've benefited the company. This individual is unfairly prejudiced against me. It's poor for the workplace, it's creating a toxic work environment, whatever, and ask them to do justice for you. And in my experience, that has worked extremely well. Things like upper management suddenly taking a weird interest in that person and saying like, oh, well, you know, these 7 people have quit in the last couple of months and they've all cited this individual. So it creates kind of like this corporate spotlight that goes from this person because the spirit of the place is like, they're creating problems and I don't want that to be the case. So appealing to them can be really, really helpful. It's not doing domination magic, it's simply making the people who have the authority to do things aware of the problem. And that has almost always solved it for me.
I just wanted to kind of go off of what Ysha was saying about signs from the universe. And I know that the original prompt was, you know, you've already done everything, but I think it's important to ask yourself, like, have you really already done everything? Because I think that the universe will often put you into a situation that you need to be in order to grow, right? And personal development is incredibly important to me outside of magic. So, I mean, I think the first thing anybody should really do is say, is this person really being an asshole to me, or am I consistently 5 minutes late and take an extra 10-minute long break? Am I really doing everything I can to, you know, excel at this job, and is this truly unfair? And I think that should be a starting point before any magic happens.
Yeah, I just remembered a few things which are going to be more like fun facts that come from my cultural background, maybe other people don't know about. Something that is very popular in Brazilian folk magic are powders. So there's, for example, the vanishing powder that I taught how to make on my channel the other day. If you want somebody to be gone, that's a classic. It's a old but gold classic. And other thing that exists, I think that we often try to avoid this type of topic or kind of pretend that it doesn't exist, but it does. People do baneful magic all the time. And something that happens a lot in Brazilian culture when it comes to baneful workings are the use of animal parts, like, for example, hearts, heads. You can do a lot with animal parts, and it is really nasty. It is very powerful. You're gonna get the result you want, but you're gonna get part of that energy with you. Don't even try to banish the energy. It doesn't work that way. Part of the energy is going to stick with you, and you're going to take a toll, you know, for what you are performing there. It's gonna bite your tail. And another thing that is very big as well is sympathetic magic of like several ways. There's the puppet that I've mentioned, but there's also candles shaped into particular formats. And I remember when I was a kid, there was a swamp near my house. And at that place, there was like a natural source of water that my mother would go to fetch some water, like pure water. And when we went there to get water, I would see all those ritual things laying around the swamp area, like heads and feet and like body candles. It was like, wow, what's that supposed to be? So it is a real thing. People do it. People want to get their way. Even if we sometimes try to pretend, it's not like that. Yes, it is. So I'm not going to teach anything, but it is out there.
I had actually a follow-up question for Astralogical. The thing about the spirit of the workplace, are we talking about spirits like as in local, geographical, or, for example, if you're working remotely? Because I feel personally interested in that.
Yeah, it's actually the spirit of the workplace. So, for example, I can explain how I came across the one that I work with. My current workplace is very proud of its founding and its history. And so what I did was I went back and I found the date that it was founded, when it like came into being, right? From that, I created a natal chart for the company, and I have used that in various things since then. But from a natal chart, you can create or find out the name of the good daemon or the natal angel or whatever you want to call it. And they're kind of and there's also a natal daemon or like the quote unquote bad spirit. They're both useful in different ways, but you can appeal to them to do your, shall we call it, dirty work for you, and to perform that kind of justice magic. So that's what I did. That's how I was taught. What I usually recommend to other people, but some areas also have their own like subgroups. For example, so if you knew that like your particular business line was created at this point and you wanted to get more specific, you could then make the natal chart for like your business line within the company and use that spirit that way. So there's varying levels of complexity that you can get into with this idea, but I just appeal to the larger organization spirit because they're typically more concerned with like the well-being of the organization of a whole. And if you can show that somebody's actions are impacting the well-being of the whole organization, they're going to be the ones who come down with a harsher force, shall we say.
Wow. Well, now I feel nasty and disgusting for what my answer is going to be, because you all were so nice and tame. So, well, what I would do for domination work, let's say all mundane actions have been taken, okay? We've done all the things in our mundane life. Let's say I cannot quit this job. Like, I absolutely cannot quit. If I had a shitty boss, let's be honest, I would probably just quit my job and pick something, some other better scenario to be in. But if I had to be there, and if I wanted to demand respect, and I really wanted to dominate, first of all, it's so incredibly difficult to do domination work, to really override the free will of someone else. That's so difficult, and I feel like a lot of people like struggle to even be able to do that effectively. So what I do is I bury them and I urinate on them. So I take a little poppet of my boss, Sanhre's face. So I make a little poppet out of my boss in this scenario, which I don't know, I may have done this before or not. Anyways, so and I, add my tag locks or whatever. I put them in a jar with some nasty correspondences. I bury them in the ground because I want them buried, and then I pee on the spot where they're buried. And if you think about a dog peeing on a tree, it is marking their territory, right? It is dominating. They're establishing dominance by peeing on that tree. And that is exactly what I do to assert my dominance. And let me tell you, it works. So that is what I would do in this scenario. I'm definitely not against any sort of baneful domination magic, obviously. If you have to do it, there you go. Astra, go ahead.
I want to make you feel less alone because I also, like, despite this whole conversation and us saying that there is like a moral aspect to this, which there certainly is, I hold to a 3-day rule where I will give myself 3 days of like introspection and some serious consideration if this is something that I want to do before I decide to do it. I have done it in the past. For me, it's usually not about force as much as it is subtle influence. And I actually utilize the elementals for these things, particularly the undines and the sylphs, so the water and air elementals. Because for me, it's not so much about like brute force as it is like subtle influence. I want to turn them into a marionette. And so for that, the like air spirits can whisper things in their ears, give them suggestions, both when they are vulnerable and asleep and when they are awake. And the water spirits, if you think about like sirens and how they drew men to their deaths, the same kind of idea. It's, you know, implant like my desires, my thoughts into their dreams, like let this impact their day to day, so on and so forth. So I take like a little bit more of a subtle approach, but very much like a mindfuck approach in a sense. Not something I've had to do often. Have done it. It has worked. So no like shame on the domination magic. It's definitely not first resort, but like it does have to happen sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's the most important part to say is that it's not a first resort. Okay, this is like total last resort. I'm not just like peeing on everybody because they make me angry. That's not what I'm trying to say. So it's definitely a last resort situation. All right, so we've talked about domination work. I actually had a lot of other prompts here under this category, but for timing purposes, I think we're just going to move on to the next category. And for those watching the video, we may do a part 2 where anybody here is welcome to come back, and then I can bring in some other practitioners potentially. I'm just throwing that idea out there. I don't know if it's a set done deal, but I'm going to skip the rest of the domination prompts so we can move deeper into Baneful Magick, because domination is kind of one of those things where you're walking the line. Is it Baneful Magick? Is it not? I don't know. It's like right on that line, but now I want to get into Baneful Magick and really talk about, you know, the difference in our ethics when it comes to Baneful Magick. I think that would be a great conversation. So the question in our Baneful Magick category is, let's say a situation has reached a point where you or your loved ones are in danger. You are attempting to protect yourself and your loved ones from this danger by performing Baneful Magick on the perpetrator. What methods do you use for this scenario? And if you do not practice Baneful Magick, what else would you do in this situation and why? And we're talking about magically, of course. Magically speaking, let's assume all mundane steps have been taken to rectify the problem.
All right. So I guess the thing with the aspen tree would also be one thing that I would try. But it depends on if the person is just harming me and my family, or if they're harming a lot of people. Because if they're harming a lot of people, then me just saying like, oh, I'm banishing you or something won't do anything, because then they will just fuck up someone else's life. So I kind of feel like a banishing itself doesn't really work, so I would try to like bind them to stop them from doing that. So the aspen tree thing would be one thing. If I would want to be more harmful though, if I'm really pissed, I would maybe send a spirit over. Okay, that's like a classic. There are also like more like a little bit weirder things that I would do. So for example, I would send a troll shot their way, which is basically just like a malicious spell, basically. And I would, for example, be able to do that with like these Marimo moss balls. I don't know if you know what those are. They're like tiny little spherical moss balls. They grow that way in like specific rivers. And you can use those, and for example, with your intention in your mind, spit on them, because of course it's moss, so they will like absorb all of that nasty stuff. You could also pee on it or something, whatever you want to do, and then throw it their direction. Or something that I find really smart, as you may have already taken from my answers, I really like to work with trees. And of course, some trees have like these weird growths where they have like branches that rub on each other and they will squeak. So one thing that you can do is to basically make a spell pouch and put like some of their hair or something, or just a tag lock, something in there with like, for example, dirt from a place that is very troubled, like where there are a lot of troubled spirits or like a battlefield or something nasty like that. Put that in there, put like some herbs that could harm, like stinging nettle or something like that, and put that spell bag between some of those branches so that it continuously scrubs on them. So that can really wear them down over time. So it's a nice, longer working thing. And if I was in a very nasty mood, I would probably put up a Nivstang, but I would have to have like some kind of space where I can do that. So it's basically like a pole, and you put an animal head on it, and carve runes in it, with like some kind of curse, and you put it up looking into the direction of the person, and like the curse can be like various different things. So you could also technically banish with that if you want to, but you can do a lot of stuff with that.
So, you have tried everything. You tried to talk to them, you tried to be the bigger person and all, but everything has failed. Your life continues to be a nightmare because that person is giving you a hard time. So, I follow the philosophy of doing no harm but taking no shit. If the situation gets to a point where it is unbearable, then what I do is get a tag lock of that person. If you work with them, if they are in your life somehow, you will find a way of getting a tag lock. You're gonna get it. You're gonna go to a cemetery, especially one that you already go frequently, because you already know the neighborhood, you already know the spirits in there and everything. And me particularly, I would take some cachaça, which is a Brazilian beverage made out of sugar cane. It's something very strong. It is the drink that we use for spirits. And I would go to a crossroads in the cemetery, call a spirit, and place the tag log, place the drink, and here's the deal. I would explain everything, just wait for it. It's very effective and very simple. It just takes a drink and a tag lock.
Hey, so yeah, this is something that I definitely have struggled with, especially recently, because I kind of have a situation that is very similar to what you just described in my life right now. And, there is the part of me that is like, I don't want to send out more harmful energy out into the world. This guy is clearly already troubled. How do I become invisible, to his tantrums, I guess is a way to describe them. And so I do struggle with like, what is that line that for myself, where am I going to feel okay? How am I going to feel good about myself? Kind of as you, Aster, mentioned, like when you do Baneful Magick, you're carrying part of that around with you. And I very much feel that. So, in my most angry time around this person in the last couple months, I did have a really baneful spell come to me, and I really wanted to use it. And it was basically like, guys, you might want to hold your ears here because it's not nice to the testicles. But in my anger, I wanted to like rip his balls out. And so this spell came to me where I would take a block of wood, write his name on it, take a couple of dried figs that I had, and hammer a nail through the figs into the wood and then hang that up, right? That is awful, really, if you think about like the what's going into that. I think when it comes to my impetus or my desire for revenge, that's not a good time to act. If I'm feeling like really incensed and I feel like I want to get back at somebody for being a dick, for doing something terrible, then that's not a good time to actually act. And sort of like Astra said, she gives herself 3 days to sit and think about it, and like, is this something that I really want to do? And if so, then move on with it. At this point, I haven't acted on that desire. I love that the spell came to me so quickly, and like I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but it still sits in a liminal place of like, how do I deal with this guy? And what are the other options that I could do to make this a better situation? And most of the time when I'm in a more balanced, calm place, I think, well, how can I improve the situation rather than make it worse? Because if I pull out my big guns, that energy is going to be there. It's going to be in the space. It's going to be in my sphere. And do I want to deal with that as well? Because most of the time I don't want to pay attention to it. I don't want to put the energy into, the negativity that's going to just exist.
Okay. So this is a two-part thing. Number one, I really love Zen philosophy, and I always try to push myself to see how forgiving can I be, how tolerant can I be, how calm can I be. But the question involved your family. And if you were threatening my child, and that was real, then I would annihilate you. I would get a tag lock, I would insert it into a poppet or an effigy. I would use blood to put runes on it. I would stab it through the heart. I would bury it in a cemetery, and I would evoke Fenrir and request that he go fetch.
Okay, so I was making notes, or when you were talking. So, I mean, I have a lot to say. I was busy writing while people were talking. The first thing I want to say is I think revenge and rage can be very powerful tools. Obviously, when you're taking the time to be aware of the situation, you're not reacting to things. You're actually being conscious about your decision-making skills, I think is important. But rage and revenge can be very powerful energies to work with in this particular scenario. I also thought it was interesting how you said you almost just want to disappear. And I think there's a magical element that you could add into this situation where you just do become invisible to him or irrelevant to him or unattractive to him, if that was a route that you wanted to go. For me, if my family is in danger, I want to destroy you on all aspects. And so what I want to do is destroy the infrastructure of your life. So I don't really necessarily look at it just as in like banishing you or pushing you away. I want to destroy your financial health. I want to destroy your physical health, your mental health, one by one. So I like to layer my workings. So we'll start with, your housing, your security, how you feel, maybe work out an eviction, maybe something to that effect. Tag locks are really good. I like to spit in jars, get dirt from paths that are heavily walked. You can put that in there, some blood, cayenne pepper, some ginger, put it in there. I like to use cat shit, put it in a litter box, I think is really great. You can do that. I love war water. I'm a big proponent of war water. But I think if you start to level things and you start to destroy somebody's life as a whole, it kind of distracts them from attacking your family. But I think, again, there's a very strong element to where if it is at that level, everything goes out the window. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to protect myself and my family and my child. And if that means destroying you, you shouldn't have picked the fight. That's kind of the philosophy that I have on that. And, we'll see who the last one standing is.
So note to self, never ever upset any of you. Apart from that, so something that I started to do on the invisibility part, yes, that was usually my first reaction. Bad things come to me. Can you please forget about me? And something that I started to do that I must have seen when I was a child, and then it stuck with me. And then I learned afterwards. It's actually something that we do in Italy. I don't think just in Italy, but definitely in Italy. It's to put, whether it's a bad letter that got to you, whether it's, they go in the lowest drawer of my freezer of my icebox, and might remember on the bottom of our icebox in my village, there were a lot of papers that I always wondered, were they just label stuff? No, that must have been what it was. On the matter of proper, I never realized that it was Baneful Magick. To me, I was doing heavy protection, heavy banishment. The issue is when the problems were internal to the family. So specifically for me, the problems came from mother, which I don't have a good relationship with. And the way that her choices affected my life and my wife's life were going really bad last year, to the level that Justin was talking about. Like, we lost our house, we lost all the security that we had that affected our mental health. It got risky. And at some point I was just like, I did this spell that was based on the Tower card of the tarot, which was like, this is already where I'm at. The best thing that can happen is that out of all those things coming down, better things come out. That accidentally worked in the sense that I didn't expect, but it worked. And I didn't realize that it was just, you've come at me, I just don't want you to come at me anymore.
I have so many ideas. Okay, so like everything, I think Baneful Magick is a sliding scale of you're an annoying flea and I just want you to go away, to I am royally going to fuck you up because you have messed with me and people I care about. Because this prompt is on the extreme end of the spectrum, what you're going to hear from me are the extreme end of things. And not all of them, because some I will never share. So something that I created, I think it was about 2 years ago now, at the guidance of some spirits on my team, was to make a Baneful Magick spell based on Dante's Inferno. And it kind of goes along the line of what Justin was speaking about earlier, how you kind of target every aspect of their lives as you lead them down from the 1st level to the 9th level. And the goal there is essentially I have spirits assigned to various levels who do various things, and they are all directed toward a particular person with the instruction of until they quit, like, then you keep going. There's like a restricted timeline and everything, and at the end, you know, it's like madness and death is like the culmination. It's never had to actually go that far, but this idea of like really breaking them down piece by piece until they will just stop because they can't take it anymore. That's one thing. Alternatively, something I think you can do is use people who have a history with less savory things. So think like serial killers or stalkers or people who like would poison other individuals, stuff like that. If you can get dirt from the graves of those individuals and call them to help you, especially if those people have had a history with like the experience that you are encountering. So if somebody targeted their family and then they killed the individual, like that would be a perfect comparison, right? So calling on them to help you, spirits of people who lived, so saints and otherwise, they are some of your most powerful tools in terms of like appealing to sympathy, right? Like, you encountered this, I'm now encountering this, will you do what you did for your own family? Kind of again, it's like, okay, you've done something that's really shitty and now you're gonna reap the, I guess it's not a benefit to them, but a benefit to me, like, of those actions, right? So for me, it's a lot of like, fuck around and find out. You fucked around and now you're gonna find out for sure. And so I'm not afraid to go that direction. It's not like a preference, right? Like, these are things that are on the extreme end, but they exist and I will use them.
I just want to add one thing really quick. Not about like any methods or anything like that, but just something to maybe think about if someone wants to do Baneful Magick on someone. And that is that try to figure out first if they're, for example, living with their family, if they have pets around, if there's anyone around that you can that you should probably keep safe, because of course, like, their pet or their child or someone around them, it like that person fucked with you probably isn't their fault. So if they have someone else around, maybe place protections on those other people's first, so that they will not be affected, because I think, like, actually throwing a proper curse is kind of like an atomic bomb. Like, it will have an immense effect, and especially if you do something like I don't know, making them lose their house or their job or something that will have heavy effects on the people around them. So if there are people around, maybe consider protecting them first. And also, if you have a connection to them, try to sever that connection first, because otherwise it may fall back on you, which that would be nice.
Yeah, on that note, I think when it comes to spirit work in these regards, like the creation of the pacts is really important in that respect. So making sure that like their violence, if you will, is very targeted to a particular individual, that you give them instructions not to harm those who play no part. You can incorporate that language in those pacts to kind of keep the spirit in line and ensure that it is very tailored and specific to the individual. And that can be very important, especially if you're going like real hardcore.
Another thing that I remembered that is really big in Brazilian culture is giving your target a cursed something for them to eat. If it is someone that you are in contact with and you are kind of forced to have a relationship with that person because you work together or whatever, you can easily get them to eat something. So in Brazilian culture, in this spiritual context, we are taught to be very careful what you accept to eat, because that is something very powerful to eat, like a curse, not a curse, but a hex prepared by someone and infused into food. So that's also something that you can do. And just to make clear for everybody watching, all of those things we're discussing now, this is like the last resort. It's not the first thing you're going to try, because the consequences can be devastating. You can literally destroy somebody's life. So just keep it in mind.
I was just going to kind of echo that about how important I can't even say it now. Being specific is when it comes to Baneful Magick. It is the most important type of magic, that you need to be specific about what you're doing, what your intentions are. It needs to be well thought out and well planned. It's not just something you do all kind of lackadaisy. You need to be sure. I firmly believe that like magic is like water, and it's going to take the easiest path forward. And if you're throwing nasty shit at somebody and they got kids, pets, who knows what, like you don't know how it's going to manifest in their lives. You can't 100% guarantee that. So you want to be safe. You don't want to be a psycho, like to that level.
It was so hard for me not to interject because I just wanted to respond to so many things you all said. But yeah, I mean, the question is about, this is that absolute last resort. We've taken all the mundane tasks. This is, to echo what you all have said, this is not something that we would do as the very first solution. And there have been times where when I was younger and I was naive and I wasn't really considering the consequences of my actions, I did destroy a man's life. He was stalking me, harassing me. He was abusive. I wanted him to get the fuck out of my life. I was in danger, and I single-handedly ruined his life. And then, even though I potentially think he deserved it, I felt so guilty afterwards. It took me months of working through that guilt of what I had done in retaliation to what he was doing to me. So Baneful Magick is no joke, and I think that we do need to take an account of how the aftermath is going to affect us and our psyche, and how we may potentially feel awful afterwards for what we did. So there's always that. With that said, let me tell you some stuff that I do. So, so I really like working with poppets. I love a good skull candle to do some candle magic. I love skulls specifically because you can use it to really manipulate someone else's mind, and you can really target their thought process with that. So I like, a little bit of nails in the head as you're screaming into the working. I've got this fuck off oil that my coven mate made for me, and it has a bunch of dead flies, rotten things. She actually made it while she was screaming into the bottle. So this stuff is so potent and powerful, and I absolutely love it. I use my fuck off oil. I drizzle that over my working. I scream my intentions. I nail the nails into the head. It's a whole thing. I will say I've also done penis candle spells where you give the person ED, erectile dysfunction, because sometimes, if you're stopping a cheater from, or let's say it's even not cheating. Let's say it's even worse, where I don't want to trigger anybody, but let's say that we need that ED to happen. You can always take a penis candle and do a little something there. But my big one, if I'm really going to go all out and I really want to shred someone to pieces, I do a chessboard. And This is, I think, something I talked about in my candle magic video towards the very end, where I build this chessboard of all these different components and correspondences and candles. And the goal is on the right hand of the chessboard, what I ultimately want to happen. And every candle and every correspondence corresponds to different aspects of that person's life that I'm wanting to take down. So similar to what, Justin was saying in Astra, and some of you taking this person down bit by bit and really tackling every single aspect of their life. And each day I would do energy work and move all of those candles closer and closer to the end goal, as if I'm playing chess on their life. So that's kind of what I do. Like I said, this is an absolute last resort, and please consider the ethical, consider all of that stuff when you're doing work like this.
Something I forgot to mention that I did want to mention, but like I got sidetracked listening to everybody else. My mind went to like the worst of the worst things that I've done. Something that I have really enjoyed working with, and I think is particularly effective, is the Picatrix. So if you're into astrological magic at all, the Picatrix has a lot of baneful magic in it. So destroying buildings, creating enmity between people, including like friends, spouses, even like slave masters, so the equivalent of like boss employee to us, right? And so utilizing the Picatrix and a lot of those things by doing elections and creating these astral images on talismans. You can do it in like wax and metal, and you bury it different places, whatever. It's a big field. It's very effective. This is how I caused the building to burn down. So that's also something you can do, especially if you're really more into the astrology than like the nitty-gritty. That is a very effective method of working baneful magic.
Two thoughts that I just wanted to kind of randomly share. Number one, Ivy, fuck that person. I don't know why you felt bad. And then number two, I think I've mentioned this to Ivy before. And listen, this. I'm just gonna warn you right now. This is TMI. Okay. And I apologize, but for science, I am a pretty active practitioner of BDSM. I've been doing it for a very, very long time. And just, I want to know if you could use a willing masochistic partner to transfer pain to an unwilling victim. I really want to know if that works, but I'm not going to try it because that would be unethical.
But for science, if it's consensual, consensual and they want that pain, oh my God, please report that.
But the idea is to transfer to somebody who doesn't want it, and that part can't be consensual. So I would need to be angry enough at a person to want to try this. But yeah, so
sounds like a good time. I think you should try it, see what happens. All right. So let's move on to something lighter. Now that we've talked about baneful magic and all the terrible things that we would do to people, let's talk about self-love. What a change of pace. All right, so self-love. So I want to hear about your favorite self-love techniques. Let's decide, or the scenario is you have decided that you are dedicating this whole next month to working on yourself and increasing your self-love. What is your favorite self-love spell or self-love technique? Like, what are some things that you would do over the course of this next month?
I used to think that personally, I come from different marginalizations. The world has already told me so many times that I suck, that I don't tend to have stuff like imposter syndrome or stuff like that. However, I have taken, evidently, and internalized some of the things that I've been told that you're not quite enough. And I'm like, fine, I'll find an alternative. Last year, I started to work with the Roman secretization of Aphrodite, Venus. And you would think that goddess of love and beauty, it's all this soft, cuddling thing. And maybe for some people it is. The main thing that has come to me from dealing with the quintessence of love and beauty is fucking claim your space. Do not bend your head. Accept you are amazing and make people accept that as well. And the thing about making space, it's something that I was really good at not taking, because in my experience and from my trauma was, no, the least I take space, the more I'm invisible, the least amount of harm I'm going to get, the least amount of racism, the least amount of queerphobia, the least amount of transphobia, all those kind of things. So the main thing that I would think, rather than coddling and rather than feeling like, no, you're amazing, no, yeah, I do know that I am. Bizarrely, there's a thing about standing up in a way and taking up space. That would be the first thing that I would go to now.
So when it comes to self-love, I think that, like, personally, my go-to are baths. I think that bath magic has this combination of magical and mundane that very few things in magic can like compare. So my chosen combination throughout a month, it would be, first of all, I would start with cleansing my energy, cleansing my state of mind through a bath. So first one would be a salt bath, the coarse salt. You just melt it down in boiling water, wait for it to cool down, and you're gonna use it from the neck down. When it comes to herbal bath magic in general, in Brazilian culture, you don't apply just any random thing in your head. The head is very important. So you need to be very sure of what you're going to use. It is a religious authority that is going to tell you what you can apply to your head specifically. That is going to be different from my head. So to avoid complications, from the neck down, always. And I usually say that the salt bath is like an antibiotics of energy. So it cleanses out everything, literally. So right after a salt bath, you just get an herbal one. And I like to do rosemary after. So yeah, it is, you can make a whole ritual out of it. In the bathtub, candles and essential oils. You can make an entire day out of it. Only doing it by itself will already get you a little bit, in a better state of mind, a better mood. And I would take one day of the week for the next like 4 weeks to complete a month. And other herbs and plants that I would use for the next weeks would be roses, especially red and yellow, and also ginger. Ginger can be used as an enhancer for any other herbs that you are using. At least that's what I've learned. But it also has its own property of enhancing self-love and self-appreciation. Also, orange is another plant, a fruit that I like to use for that purpose, and pomegranate. And there you go. Each week, one day, you do a spa day and you combine magical and mundane in bath magic. You're gonna get out of that month feeling like a new person. Trust me.
I am not somebody who really does anything for self-love. I kind of have to echo what Ysha said. The way I grew up, I was my light was dimmed a lot of the time. And so when I started working with Hecate, that was really transformational and has continued to be transformational throughout these past 3 or 4 years in pursuing weight loss surgery, losing 150 pounds. I did that, and working with her and getting more in tune with my sexuality, showing my body more. For a long time, one of my offerings, maybe TMI, but it is what it is. I would masturbate to her and give her semen. That was a big thing, something I never would have done before, but really, that's, I guess you would say, has been my self-love journey, has been through deity work and just accepting my identity, my sexual orientation, who I know I am as a person, and really owning that unapologetically and stepping into that space and just kind of having the philosophy that I know who I am, I know what I believe, and that's what I'm going to do regardless of how other people feel about it. And that's really been like my self-love journey, I guess you could say.
Okay, I totally agree with the deity work aspect. I like one of the main deities that I work with since the beginning has been Freya. And of course, like Freya is a badass goddess. Like, of course, a lot of people only see her as this like beauty and love goddess, which she is definitely not. I really like to compare her to like a bramble bush or something. Looks very pretty, fertility there, but can also fuck you up. So Freya is like a badass. So like self-love is like one very big thing that you can do if you work with her. So that's one thing that came for me just by itself. Like, I didn't really do anything about it, but just by working with her, she just put me through some challenges that really helped, for example, with my social anxiety, connected me more with my body, made me more aware of, for example, what I wanted sexually. I know a lot of AFAB people have like big problems about their sexuality and saying what they want and even realizing what they want. So like a lot of those things just came naturally while working with her, without even having to do any spell work about it. But of course, I know there are a lot of people who like don't want to or just aren't interested in deity work. So for those people, I would probably start with doing some divination to figure out what the problem is, because I kind of feel like self-love and or like missing self-love is such a vast thing, and it can have so many different reasons. And if you first of all figure out why you are lacking self-love or self-confidence, then you can do specific things to tackle that. And I would probably just figure out if there's like some specific situations, maybe some trauma or something like that, that you have to first get rid of before you can become more self-confident. So then I would, yeah, get rid of those with like some kind of transformation spell. One thing that I really like is, for example, working with birch bark as, yeah, like you would work with basically with snakeskin. So if you look at birch trees, they shed their bark, and you can write on it or carve in it various things. So I would get some birch bark. That's of course only the birch bark that is being shed, because otherwise you're hurting the tree. We don't want that. But then I would either just charge, like, I always breathe my intention into things, so I would either write whatever I want to get rid of on those pieces of birch bark, or I would breathe it into them and either burn it or put it into a north running stream so that it takes it away. And then I would tackle the self-love stuff. But in my experience, if you get rid of the things that keep you from loving yourself, it comes by itself. But if you would want to do something more specific, something, for example, that's big in Scandinavian folk magic is like selecting the dew from midsummer morning. So I would try to do that and try to find like a flower meadow or something, and try to collect the dew from there, and then use that as a moisturizer or something like that, for example, or like work with various specific herbs. One thing weirdly that I work with that has nothing to do with Scandinavian practices, but may be interesting for Ysha, is hibiscus, because hibiscus is huge in Egypt. Like, it's the like Egyptian plant basically, along with lotus. So hibiscus, in my experience, is amazing for self-love. But also dog rose, for example, or vanilla or apple flowers, things like that.
Okay, my answer is gonna be, I'm gonna be very honest about this. I don't struggle with self-love in the traditional way, I guess that you would say most people do. My struggle is in not becoming a total egomaniac. I am a double Leo, and my friends used to call me the confidence monster when we were teenagers. And there's in a not so distant parallel reality, there is a version of me that is a cult leader, like totally. So my struggle has always been to develop more empathy, to become more compassionate, to do more community work, to just become the best version of myself that I possibly can be, because if I did not do that, it would be bad. And then also, you know, from a more practical standpoint, because that's just me, right? I think that if you're really struggling with self-love, then you, from my perspective, have blockages in your heart chakra and your lower chakras. And if you could just deal with those and face them and say, okay, what information am I holding on to that is totally blocking me up? You know, it would start to really help that. And I thought it was interesting that all the colors Aster mentioned were the lower chakras. they correspond, and that, you know, that's really where the issue is going to be.
I just love what Benta said about everything about Freya and all of that, because I felt the same way when I started working with Hecate. Everyone was like, she's the dark mother. I'm like, I don't get mother energy. She's telling me to touch my penis and take my clothes off. I'm not getting mother energy here. I did not expect, at least that's not the kind of mother energy I want, okay? I don't need any more trauma in my life. But it was just completely transformational. And she is the one that really highlighted that my own issues with self-love was my sexuality, was my sexual identity. And I used to spend so much time as a young child and as a teenager praying to God to make me not be gay. And honey, it doesn't work. And I also was very confused when I started working with her, because I work with saints and I'm like, how does this work? Like, how is this going to interject together? Yes, mother is mothering, honey. Okay, literally, American Horror Story Coven just came to my mind. And if you've seen it, you know, you know. That's a whole nother thing. But yeah, and then I also love how you talked about breathing life into things. That is my favorite thing to do with spell work. I breathe on everything. I'm like a creeper, whether it's an herb or a candle. I'm like on everything. And like, you're a weirdo. I know, I own it. That's my two. Yeah, there you go.
So I don't do self-love in the sense that most people think about self-love. I will say, first of all, I do think that self-love, a lot of it comes from just understanding who you are as a person. And for that, you need to be in therapy, if at all possible. The other aspect of it is that I find a lot of comfort in my religion. So I am Catholic. It's a big part of who I am, what I do. And there's a lot of comfort to be found in that for me. So if I am feeling down or like I need, you know, whatever, like things just don't feel right. One of the things that I have done, especially like if we go back to the initial question of like, what would you do over a month? For me, it would be a lot of religious devotion. It would be a lot of like going to mass every single day, going to Eucharistic adoration, things to really just surrender myself into what I see as like the very loving arms of Christ and like God the Father from like the Christian framework. And just spending time with that, because that is what like reinvigorates me and my soul as an individual. And that's like what I would do for self-love. And they're also like saints. I think Justin probably knows the ones that I'm referring to, who are really good about like listening and kind of sending you love and like showing you where you are still worthy of love. And so something that I really also enjoy doing is just journaling with the saints. That's been a big part of my practice recently, and especially at night, and discussing like the areas where I feel ashamed, or it's like I, you know, did this thing or I treated somebody this way and I feel really guilty about it, and like I'm worried that it, you know, impacts like my worthiness of love, and this reminder of like that's not true and all these things. So for me, a lot of like the self-love goes back to just fully integrating myself into the devotional aspects of my religion.
So I suppose there are several different ways that I go into self-love. If I'm going to be doing something magically, I often find like my favorite jewelry to wear, because it gives me like a lift up. And I will either like charm it or just kind of let whatever I'm feeling guide myself towards which piece I want to wear, so that I'm feeling better about myself in general. It's glamour, I guess, you know, lifting myself up in that way. Also, what really works for me are scents. And that's sort of the bigger leap into just getting into my senses, because when I'm not connected to my body or my senses is when I get really out of touch with myself and get really overwhelmed by the outside world. So making sure that I am embodied in my body and I'm able to reach out through my different senses, whether it's smell or my whatever, feeling, touch. So feeling the sun on my skin, taking a bath, taking a spell bath. Water helps cleanse and release and move things through. Sitting by a body of water, whether it's the ocean or a river, a waterfall, things like that also help move the energy through the body so that it doesn't get stuck. Feeling a nice, like just paying attention to things like a nice breeze on my skin or the sunshine, the warm sun on my skin. So really slowing down my life or speeding it up if I'm in a depression, and finding the little things that the elements that nature has to give me to sort of refill from the inside up out.
As I was listening to everybody, I was just thinking about the interesting kind of dichotomy between the idea of self-love and how our whole identity really is based on external factors and how other people treat us. And yet we term it self-love, even though it's not really necessarily how we see ourselves. We're basing on how everybody else sees us and how everybody else treats us and how we internalize that. So that's an interesting thing. I also loved, Astra, how you spoke about a lot of it being about our worthiness of love and whether we feel like we can accept love. And I think that's a big component of it as well. Just an observation.
I swear, last thing. Justin had a very, very good point that I always try to bring up. The thing about self-love and everything like that needs to be taken in measure with stuff like the system, the patriarchy that we live in. I'm sorry if I'm being a bit biased where I come from, but it is a huge issue that the system keeps putting personal responsibility on the individual when the system is fucked up. And so the system is queerphobic, it's fatphobic, it's racist, and all of those things. So there's a certain amount of work that we can do on self-love, but never to think that, oh, before we expect you to be whiter, to be more educated, to be all of that. Now you need to love yourself, despite the fact that every time that you get out of the door, you're going to have the world being against you. So those are things to always take. It's not all about personal responsibility, because unfortunately, we still have to go out of the door.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I'm sorry, Ivy. I just had to jump in when you were talking about that because you're gonna open up a whole can of worms. I'll be quick. I was just gonna say, before I had bariatric surgery, I very much felt like I couldn't sit in my own power. Like I didn't want to be seen. I had a lot of social anxiety. And then I had my stomach cut out, lost 150 pounds, and I'm like, okay, here I am, hear me roar. I removed that barrier. Did I have to do it that way? It's a big question about the societal pressure to look a certain way. And then I conform to that pressure, and then I feel comfortable being out in society. So it's an interesting conversation and thought process there.
I think you have, and everybody has every right to do everything they need to be more comfortable and be safer. That's the main thing, to be safer every time that we get out of the door.
You all said such delicious things. I love it. I am so here for the self-love. I've got a couple of rituals that I wanted to share for my personal self-love journey of struggling through mental health and feeling absolutely worthless for the majority of my life until I actually started using a lot of these tools to make myself believe that I am worthy and that I'm not, all the things that other people told me I was as a child. But one of my favorite techniques for self-love, so there's 3 techniques that I kind of wanted to share. The first one is a candle spell. You make a sigil for self-love, you carve it in on the candle, and then you burn a little bit each day over the course of a month. And what I would usually do when the candle's burning, I sit down to do a 10-20 minute meditation and let the candle burn during that time. And when I'm meditating, I love doing inner child work. And I think this is so important. If you go into a space in your mind and visualize a park, a forest, a beach, like wherever feels safe for you, create this safe space, and then envision your childhood self. You see this little child sitting on the bench all alone at a park, no one's there but you and the child. And you walk up to the child, and it can be really emotional. The first time I did this, I bawled my eyes out. And you walk up to your childhood self and you hug them. You just sit with them. Sometimes they're angry, sometimes they don't even want to touch you. You can just sit there in silence if you want. You can play games with your inner child. You can do whatever you want. I usually end the session by saying, I love you. You are protected. Nobody's ever going to hurt you again because I'm here now. And that whole experience is just so fucking rewarding. So I recommend everybody working with your inner child and just really, especially if you were somebody growing up where nobody had your back, you have your back now. Nobody's going to fuck with you anymore because you're an adult and you can handle that shit. So that's the first technique that I do. The second one is through sex magic. And I usually do this without a partner, specifically when it comes to self-love, because I want it to be just me. Because I was born of this culture where women could not have sex. It was just not appropriate for women to be sexually active, and B, much less like it or orgasm. I mean, that that was just not a thing. So reconnecting with the orgasm, specifically in the culture that I grew up in as a woman, and not fucking apologize for it. It's so liberating to be sexually free. So that's another thing that I do for my self-love. And then the last one, I do a lot of inner dragon work. So I have this dragon entity that I work with in my meditations that makes me feel so goddamn powerful. Every time I work with this dragon entity, and this is something that I'm not really, Benta just put something in the chat. How dare you have fun, right? Like women are not supposed to enjoy the sex and we're not supposed to do it. Like, what is that about? I'm glad that's changing though, but yeah, the inner dragon work makes me feel so powerful. And it's one of those entities that I'm not really fully allowed to talk about online. So that's really kind of the extent of what I can say on this panel, because there's certain entities that don't care if I talk about them publicly. And then there's some entities that do care and they say, keep that to yourself. This is just an us thing. And that is one of them. But I will say I do work with dragon-ish entities, and that really helps my self-love.
Yeah. You were talking about and something you said jogged my mind about literally this is the simplest thing you can do to change your world too is just looking in the mirror and telling yourself I love you, and because it'll bring up everything that you don't love about yourself as you stare at yourself. So that's a really easy spell to do. That can also be very deep.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And that's another method that I teach in my classes, is to look in the mirror. And your natural instinct, I think for almost everybody, is to immediately just start tearing yourself apart, right? But can you intentionally do the opposite? Can you look in the mirror and really find all the things that you like about yourself? And if you can do that, it gets a little bit easier every day. And then you start to just notice the things that you really like about yourself. And then I also wanted to say, again, this is just from my perspective. I truly believe that there is no separation, right? So every person that you ever meet is a reflection of you. And if you can really, really look at the world that way, it becomes really hard to tell someone like, fuck you, you piece of shit, I hate you. And you realize that person's a part of you. And that the reason you are triggered by whatever it is that there's something unhealed in yourself that they're reflecting back to you. And sometimes that's really hard. Like with the example where if someone were threatening my child, like I would fucking annihilate that person. I wouldn't think twice about it. But I still do believe that every person you ever encounter is a reflection of you. And if you can find compassion for everybody, then you're winning at life.
Great pep talk group. I love that. So great. Such an uplifting topic after Baneful Magick. Oh, hearts to you all. Oh gosh. All right. So I'm going to switch it up. I had this in a certain order, but for timing purposes, I think, again, we're probably going to skip a lot of these prompts and maybe keep it to part 2 if we decide to do a part 2. So let's move into the topic of new beginnings, which was suggested by Benta. So I'm so excited to talk about this. So let's pretend you are in a slump and you feel like you need a fresh start, a new beginning, a change, or just a new cycle to begin in general. What techniques do you do to bring about new change or just beginnings?
I will start. So, new beginning, first of all, set a plan. What is it that I want to begin? What do I want to change? This is the first thing. I think that more often than not, the mundane comes before the magical. So, nothing will change. No new beginning will come about if you don't change your choices, your actions, etc. So, starting from there. On top of that, I really like to work with the new moon energy. So do some candle magic, some herbal baths, some spirit work towards this goal, this plan that you are creating, this new thing that you want to do. Combine everything and you can't go wrong, basically.
I think Aster has pointed on a very good point. If it needs to be in the beginning, you need to know in which way to focus and direct your energy. Something that comes to mind on the topic is, what if your life requires a change because, I don't know, you've just had a very bad breakup and maybe lives were entwined and all of that, and what do you do at that point? Like, maybe it affects everything in your life. Focus on something, focus on one thing, not many, one thing. Something bizarre that happened to me when I had a very bad breakup, was like literally moving countries and all of that. And all that I decided to focus on was my career. And this is like young Ysha happening to manifest. Genuinely behave and believe that, like, what I told myself was, like, in a year time, it doesn't matter what happened, work in the music industry. It took 11 months. From a place where I didn't know anyone, I didn't know anything, I just lost years of my life. I didn't have a community around, I didn't have friends around. Focus. It works. You need to put everything there.
I hate change. So there's that. I hate change. I'm a creature of habit. I like to eat what I like. I like to go where I know, and I'm like, it gives me anxiety. But when I'm feeling stuck, or like recently, I kind of had a manic moment maybe, and just quit both of my jobs and got 2 new ones because I was sick of working in the field that I was working in. How I was like, I'm fucking bored. I hate life. I'm not happy doing this. I'm out of here. Bye. And I just, spoke to spirit and said, I'm just jumping off the cliff, and whatever happens, happens, and it'll just work out. I'm very much going all the way or no way at all. Yeah, I'm Virgo. I'm a Virgo. So I'm like, I need structure to an extent, as long as I'm in control. But I also like craziness in a controlled environment. I'm just a disaster, all in all. But when I'm feeling like I need that change and I don't know where to go, or I need a new beginning or a new start, I just find the best thing to do is go in the quiet and go on a walk, go swimming, just get away from all forms of human life. Because overall, I'm not a people person. So I just try to get away and get out, and it gives me time to really just be retrospective and introspective into my life and try to assess, okay, why am I wanting this new beginning? Why am I not happy? What choices have I made? Like Aster was saying, what choices have I made? Where am I wanting to go? Why are these things not fulfilling me anymore? And how do I make the change? And sometimes those things are making me comfortable in that moment, but you kind of have to, like, shift is usually not easy. So sometimes you just got to be uncomfortable, but I hate change. I don't like it.
I think the answer to this has a lot to do with what stage of life you're in. When I was in my 20s, I would be in this place all the time, and I would move to a new city, and I would, I worked as a chef, so I could go anywhere. I would like be in San Francisco and be like, I don't like San Francisco anymore. I'm gonna go to New Orleans. I was in New Orleans, and then there was a hurricane, so I went somewhere else, and I went somewhere else, and I kept doing stuff. But now I would say, the advice I would give to somebody who's, let's say, been through their Saturn return, so you're 29 or older, you need to get really, really clear about your goals and about what you're here to do. And a lot of people avoid that question. I avoided it until I was 40. And now that I've figured it out and I started doing it, the cool thing is that when you align with your dharma or your purpose or your true will, whatever you want to call it, they're all the same thing in my opinion. The universe gives you this like massive tailwind, so try to get aligned with your purpose. I know that's not the easiest thing to just like do, but stay focused on your goals, on your long-term goals, on what you want to accomplish in life. And then if you do stay focused on that, you'll experience so much less turbulence and that sensation of being lost,
All right. So, first of all, I'm a person who really likes change. I have a Gemini Mars, so I like doing all of the things here and there and here and there. So sometimes that's why I wanted this prompt, because I feel like it's a thing that's not talked about a lot. Like you constantly hear about all of these things, like, oh, how do I bring in money or love or something, but this kind of thing is not really talked about a lot. But a lot of people still talk about being in slumps and not knowing how to get out of there. So I kind of thought this could be interesting, and something that I once did, which was very effective, but which is very, very simple, was to sit down during a new moon and then like channel the energy of the new moon and basically put it into knots. So I would take like color-wise, like a light turquoise or something color. I always associate that kind of color because it's so fresh with new beginnings. So I will take like a string in that color. And yeah, draw on the energy of the new moon and breathe it again. Breathe again. Breathe it into the knots while I'm making them, so that. Oh yeah, and by the way, you could also put like either douse the string in, for example, a mint infusion or something like that, or put like a mint oil on it or something, and then do it. And yeah, then whenever you're in a slump or you need a fresh idea or something like that, you can open up the knots and then like breathe in the energy of that new moon. So that was very, very helpful for me, especially if it's a Gemini new moon or like an Aquarius new moon. That was very helpful.
There's a ritual that I do that I find really beautiful and helpful, really deep. It goes deep. You can do it out in nature, and you create two concentric circles. And then you take pieces of nature. It could be like a feather, a stick, different leaves, and you assign a memory to each piece. So that has happened in the last year of your life. So, one could be you got married, another could be, and they're good and bad things. One could be that, you lost a pet, whatever it is. And you, as you're naming that piece, you put it into the outer, like in between the circles. And so you're putting each of these memories into the outer circle, and then you go back afterwards and you pick up that piece of that object that you've just infused with your memory, and then you move it into the inner circle, but the inner circle is giving it back to where it came from. So you're basically cleansing the last year of your life of all the good and bad things and making them neutral and sending them back to the universe, your God, whatever. And I found that to be super cleansing and what's the word I'm looking for? Like equaling. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean, I think. And I find that to be a really helpful way to start afresh.
That's really beautiful, Aurora. Thank you for sharing. New beginnings to me can indicate a lot of different things. So if it's new beginnings in the sense that I need to reset myself, for example, I think Aster mentioned for self-love this idea of bathing. And for me, the reset within the Solomonic tradition, we have the 7-day Solomonic, or 9, depending on what you want to do. Solomonic bath purification before you do any ritual. That's like part of the system in and of itself is a ritual itself. And so utilizing that as like a reset is something that I have done many times, often including things like ritually fasting during those 7 days. So like bread and water only, for example. It gives you a good time to just kind of sit and be quiet and reflect and think about why you want change, how to start that change, things you need to do. And it, for me, has really helped me establish like a plan from which I can then start to execute. It's just a good kind of recentering reset. In terms of like resetting or starting or new beginnings for like projects, for example, I think doing these in alignment with the eclipses is a really good idea, because every eclipse has a beginning and an end. And depending upon like the sign in which it is in, lengths will vary. But I've done this as well, even for like experimental things. If I want to experiment with something for like one eclipse cycle, I'll start it during like the first part, and then it'll end during the second. And it's a good way to kind of have this like defined frame of trying something new, entering into like a new beginning, but not necessarily having to stay there, right? Like it has a definitive end. And if you want to continue it, like that's obviously up to you. Something else that I've heard like new beginnings referred to as things like starting new habits, for example. And for this, I also turn to astrology, and I utilize the lunar mansions in this regard, because there is some science backing saying that it takes 30 days to start habits. That's not quite as accurate anymore. It can be anywhere from a week to like a couple hundred days. But I like, for my personal experience, 30 days is usually pretty good if I'm consistent, and the lunar mansions help me with that. And part of the reason why I do it through the 28 mansions of the moon, and this is like an Arabic astrology thing. If you're curious about it, I encourage you to go read the Picatrix. But you can call the spirits of the mansions and apply them to the habit that you're trying to integrate into your life and ask them for their assistance. And it's also really useful because you begin to see this habit through different lenses and how it could be beneficial and even maybe detrimental to your life. But having that holistic view really gives you the time and space you need to experiment, try it out, and even integrate it, because you have this like deeper connection and understanding to it. So like new beginnings in terms of habits, I oftentimes use lunar mansions to help with that. And then I think Sanhre was talking about like literal new beginnings. Let's say that you move to like a new city or a new town or whatever. For that, I think one of the best things that we can do as practitioners is to engage with the spirits of the genus loci. And so they're spirits of place, partially because like those spirits who are kind of geographically centric to that particular area, not only do they have the gossip of like everything that's happening in the town, they can also point you towards things that will help you grow. Like if you're looking for a job, they can point you to places that are hiring. They can say like, these are good places to work for, these aren't. Even like places to live, right? Like this is an area that is maybe like really chaotic or it's not. All of those kind of things, like they will give you kind of hints and tips and tricks and things to avoid and things to do that can really help you get settled in a particular area. And so they are truly like one of the best treasures when you move, in my opinion, is working with those spirits. But yeah, that's all I have to say on new beginnings.
I had a couple things that I wanted to share. The first thing, when it comes to new beginnings, first of all, okay, I have an Aries Venus, I have a Gemini Mars, and I have a Sagittarius Moon. I am a very fiery person. I've got no earth in my chart. I have nothing grounding me. So for me, I don't usually get in slumps. My challenge as a human being is that I have a hard time slowing down and actually being consistent and staying in one place for a long amount of time because I'm fucking gone. Like I usually don't have this struggle just because of my makeup. But if I do get into a slump, which it does happen on the rare occasion, I usually find that it's because I've completely lost my way and I forgot who I am, what I'm doing here, and what the next thing is. So I take a moment to connect to my spirit guides. I do a lot of meditation during this time. I do a lot of divination, sitting down with my tarot cards, talking to my spirit team, because really they're going to know best. Usually if I'm in a slump, it's because I literally don't know what to do. I have no idea where to take myself. So I try to talk to my spirit guides to get some advice. And I also find just connecting to earth energy in general, me being a person that lacks earth and any sort of grounding energy, just going outside, laying on the grass, especially at night, and staring up into the stars and reminding yourself of the macrocosm microcosm relationship and how fucking small but how amazing our life is. It really does kind of recalibrate things for me. And then for actual spell work, when I'm sitting down to, actually do something, I'll do things like road opener spells, of course, just to kind of remove blockages and do a little candle work there. I love working with eggs for new beginnings. So I'll do a ritual on the new moon and I'll take some eggs, some egg shells. I get rid of the actual egg. I just eat it. I don't throw it away. I eat it. But I take the shell and I try to crack it as best as possible. So I have two halves, and then I stuff the egg with whatever correspondences I want that pertain to the situation a little bit more specifically, but I usually include something minty because I find something minty or some rosemary is really good for kind of like reinvigorating the soul. And so I'll stuff that in there, and then I'll stuff a tiny piece of paper in it as well that says something along the lines of bringing new beginnings to me, write out my intention, and then I close the egg and seal it with candle wax, and then I go and bury it in one of the corners of my garden because I have such like a deep connection to my garden and the whole spirit of the garden. So that's something that really helps me bring new changes, working with eggs, working with the new moon. I also enjoy working with acorns. I think that, or any sort of seed, like any seed that you can bring into the situation because the seed represents the beginning. And yeah, that's kind of what I do.
I forgot to mention this, which is why my hand is up. So in the sense of kind of resetting oneself and that being the aspect of new beginnings we're talking about, something that I think is more common in the ceremonial sphere than elsewhere is the use of the greater rituals. So the greater rituals of the pentagram and the greater rituals of the hexagram. And these are often used to call in elemental or planetary and zodiacal forces. So the pentagram ritual is for elements, the hexagram is for planetary and zodiacal. And so if you, particularly in the realm of like feeling balanced, like internally, the centering and stuff, if you feel unbalanced or like you have maybe more of one than another and you really need to balance it out, those rituals, I have used them to great effect in ensuring that everything is kind of just aligned and central and balanced by either invoking or banishing excesses of certain things. So that's something that I can do. That's not even really a spell, since it is just attuning with like these particular energies within the ritual framework itself that can end up with a result of feeling like new, right? So you do this and I feel new and it's like, great, everything is back in order. We can move forward.
Next category that we're going to talk about is money. And actually, just to update everybody watching this video, we just had a conversation offline. We decided that we are going to try to do a part 2, and because we have so many prompts here that we're not even getting to today, and we've got to cap this recording at a certain time. So we're going to do this last section of money, and the prompt is you either want to get a raise or get a surprise check in the mail or find a $20 bill on the ground, etc. You want money coming your way, and you want there to be a consistent flow of cash coming in at all times. What do you do?
I will start. So first of all, you need a means through which that money is going to come to you, because it doesn't just fall from the sky, okay? So you need to create some sort of path. You need to create some sort of road so your goal, which is the money, can find its way to you. So always combining mundane and the magical. But the things that I like to do, magically speaking, is to work with spirits of the crossroads and meet my spiritual teams at the crossroads, because that's a place where they usually are, and I make offerings to them at the crossroads. There are 2 types that I usually do, and the easiest one, that's for like opening roads, that kind of thing. The easiest one is a dose of cachaça, some coins, a cigarette or a cigar, it depends who I'm talking to, and I sit there and I talk to them. I explain the situation, I explain what I want to become fruitful in my life. I give them the cachaça dose or some other drink, the cigar or cigarette lit. You gotta light it and get some smoke around. And I ask them to, see what they can do to look into the situation and make things like make the scales tip in my favor. There you go. It's very simple, straightforward, and very effective. Crossroads will never let you down.
I think, okay, so for money magic, the most important thing you could possibly do in regards to money magic is to change your energetic relationship with money, because we're all programmed to have this scarcity mindset with money. But, so visualize it this way, okay? If you were to take all the digital money in the world and turn it into cash right now, you would trip over $1 million on your way out your front door. That's how much money is around you all the time right now. You need to see it that way. If you start to see it that way, you realize it's not a big deal. You're not going to attach your survival to it. So detach money from your root chakra is the first step. Then there's all kinds of money spells you can do. You can do a money bowl, you can do this, you can do candle magic. I think that detaching that emotional weight to it, though, is the most important thing you could possibly do. And then secondly, know your worth. For an example, like you have to demand what you want in life. My coworker at my last job, who was far more qualified for the job than I was, far more. He had a degree, I don't. When our boss interviewed both of us, he asked both of us the same question. The job paid $60,000. He said, "What would you say if I offered you 50?" I said no. He said yes. I made more money than him, but I was less qualified. You cannot take the moment you accept less than your worth, you are telling the universe, I'm worth less. And you can't do that. As far as like what spell to do, like I think that's kind of like bells and whistles. I think that changing those relationships and your energetic connection to money is where it's at. And then also start a business. No, don't get a job, start a business. Like jobs suck. This is just me, but like, if you have an idea, just do it. Do your idea and see what happens.
So I am a broke witch, but two things. One, Sanhre is very right. There's a self-understanding of worth that some people think it's greed, some people think it's arrogance. It's just the understanding of self-worth. I completely agree on that. In my personal experience, it was useful to check how dignified Jupiter was. If not Jupiter, the Sun. If not Sun, Venus. Do not underestimate Venus in those sense. I try to have a thing for elective astrology, so when the planets are best dignified for that. And when last Jupiter was well dignified, it was quite impressive. Like even very simple money spells paid off for me. And then January 2023 came and kind of less. One thing that I will say is money is a cycle in my experience. You ask the universe to give you need to give something back. Every time here in the UK, I basically, because I'm disabled and various things, I live on universal credit, which is welfare. Every time that I get paid monthly, 10 of those quids go to homeless people that I walk past and that kind of thing, which it's relevant to me. I have to be very attentive to get to the end of the month. It's the very least that I can do. And to me, working through that cycle helps. At the same time, every time that I see a penny on the floor, I pick it up and say, thank you, universe.
Okay, so I have a couple of thoughts on money magic. The first is that when you think about money and the role that it plays in society, it's very much about supporting your lifestyle, right? And because of that, it's very attuned with like earth elemental kind of energy. And so when you consider like planetary stuff for enhancing your money magic, picking an earth sign is always going to be ideal. Things of that nature, just to help like bring it down into the physical. Because some of the other signs, especially like watery signs and mutable, it's less tangible in a sense, and that's really what you want. Something that I have done for money magic in the past, and this ties into something that Aster said as well, about having a place from which you can draw the money to yourself. If you have multiple revenues, I always recommend, like I'm a big dirt fan, collecting dirt from all of the places from which you pull money. And then I have used those in a working with the pentacle from the Veritable Key of Solomon, utilizing like wealth and whatever, and essentially doing like a very basic ritual with that and calling the spirits within those pentacles to assist in drawing that money from those places to me. So that's done in my home, so that the dirt is the connection, right, from the place to me. The other thing that actually blinked on the other thing. Okay, I'll come back to it later. Someone else go, and I'm sure it'll come to me.
All right, then I'll go for now. Okay, so I know most people do their money magics on Thursdays. And in general, I agree with that. I also really like Thursdays to do that because, of course, Jupiter Day, but also Thor's Day, and Thursdays, because of its connection to Thor, is like the best weekday in Scandinavian folk magic to do any kind of working. So Thursdays have like double the energy. But I also think if the money is supposed to come through your business, I would do it on a Wednesday maybe. Then also, of course, like I don't know if it's interesting, but I would probably use like rowan berries or like dandelion flowers or something like that. Oak is also a big thing, especially if there are acorns that remained on the tree during winter. So you can go to oak trees and see if there are still acorns on them. And if yes, then they have like a specific heightened type of power, and then you can simply just carry them with you for some money, but also luck magic. So it's a kind of like a double thing, a very easy thing to do. There's also juniper pollen that you can collect, which is, I think, in Swedish. It could also be in other Scandinavian languages, but I know about Swedish, where it's called elven gold. So that's very nice. So you can collect that and use that in money magic. I think that's very cute. In general, there's a big connection to like treasures and everything, to like hills and mountains, because of course, like you had these burial mounds where people would like put all of the treasures, and people in general would like bury their treasures everywhere. And there's so many folk stories about like people seeing that a hill opens up and then there's like some elves or something or some dwarves and they have like a treasure there. So doing any kind of magic like that on a hill would be great, especially if it's a one where you know that there is a burial mound under there or was. Also, like a very, very easy thing would be to burn a bind rune made from, for example, Fehu, Gebo, or Yera, that are some that I typically connect with money magic. Yeah, and lastly, there's this very specific kind of spirit that you can create yourself that was previously used to basically steal milk from your neighbors. It's either a troll hare or a troll cat. So it's a magical cat or a magical hare that would steal money from your neighbors. But you could also, I guess, do that for money. So that would be also something. I haven't tried it yet, but maybe I would consider it. I kind of think that's funny.
So when talking about money magic, I agree. You have to create the form, like the path forward for that money to come through. I also am a firm believer of when doing money magic to use sigils or whatever your fancy is to protect the money you already have and to protect that money that once it gets to you, it stays with you. I think that's very important. I am a firm believer that every day is a good day if you need the money. And I am a greedy bitch, and I don't care if it's a penny or if it's $1,000, I want it. So I very much I take that philosophy. I did also want to say that Ivy had shared a sigil candle spell for maybe a year ago. I don't know. It was a long time ago. And I was like, I'm using this. And she's like, perfect. And I used that working and I found $20 in the park. And do you know, every time I go to that park, I find money. Every single time I find money. So I go there, every few weeks, and I always thank the spirits of the land that are there. And I'm like, okay, keep this money going. But as far as like normal money magic, I like to work with Saint Expedito. He is the king. He is my God. I love him. He's amazing. Saint Jude is great. I love to work with saints for money. And I also like to keep money bowls by the front door, things that just attract money. I don't necessarily, unless it's with Saint Expedite, I try to just keep it general. Like I just want the money to be attracted to me. I don't necessarily am going to give a specific amount. Whatever the universe has to give, I'll take. And sometimes that's more than others. And I'm just grateful for it. But again, just also creating the opportunity for that money to come in a healthy, stable way, and also protecting that money once it gets in your pocket, that it stays there, I think is important.
I had one more thought on money magic because I've done this, so I want to share it because, well, two things. When you're doing money magic, kind of the way we've all been talking about, like generating the way it's going to come to you and all these good things, and like I said, starting a business, creating as much opportunity for yourself as possible. I find that with money magic in particular, the universe is less likely to just hand it to you and more likely to send you on like a literal treasure hunt. Okay, and so if you're on this treasure hunt, it is very, very, very important to follow every synchronicity that comes your way. Don't ignore them. Don't be like, I need a sign of your sign. Don't be that person. You have to act on every opportunity that shows up. Now, in total contrast to that, there is a second way to manifest money, and I've done this a number of times, and it's to beg. It's if you are absolutely desperate, like when I needed to fight for my parental rights, and I needed to pay my lawyer $10,000 that I did not have. Just sincerely, like if you need to cry, if you need to beg, and you need to say to the universe, I need 10 grand, I need it tomorrow. That can happen for you, but I'm not suggesting you do that as like your go-to method. That's a last resort.
Yeah, I actually want to echo a little bit of what you were saying, Sanhre. Is I remember one time I got a speeding ticket. Actually, no, it wasn't a speeding ticket. It was a moving violation. I ran a red light by accident, and there was a camera there. And so 3 weeks later, I get this notice in the mail. I was like, what? And and the speeding violation was $436, and I was like, I can't pay for this. Like I don't know what they're thinking. The city, I live in Los Angeles, so everything's like sky high in terms of price, but like I was like, there's no way. And I just started laughing hysterically. Can you guys hear me? Because she's barking.
Yeah.
Okay. I started laughing hysterically, and I was like, I'm giving it back to you because I don't know what to do with it. And I was like, universe, God, whatever is out there, you take care of this because I don't know what to do here. And literally 2 weeks later, I got a check in the mail for $500. That was out of the blue. But it was like last resort. Like, I have absolutely nothing to give to this, and I have no solution for this. So I just wanted to drop that in the mix. But for an ongoing spell that I do, just for I was trying to get a new client, and so that I could remove a different client that I had off my roster, and I started using the Rose of Jericho during the waxing moons. So every time the new moon would start, I would add water to the bowl and let it open, and then just light a candle for intention and be like, hey, I want for this to happen. And I did that 3 months in a row, and I got exactly to the T what I wanted, which was amazing and really cool. I still use the Rose of Jericho and do that sort of ritual every month, but I find that to be really helpful.
Okay, before I get to my actual points, I just want to echo off of something that Aurora said, which is that in moments of true need, the spirits will always find a way. Like, this is something that in my own life I have noticed, where there's sometimes where I can't fix the problem. And so really that kind of like falling to your knees and just begging for someone to listen and do something about it, it has always resulted, like, I think I don't really know maybe like what the mechanism behind the power or whatever is, but like just the earnest, like the true authentic, like earnest, I am screwed if this isn't taken care of. I think the spirits are really like sensitive to that in a way. And when they can tell that you really need it, like they will provide. Aside from that whole conversation, because I could go on a rant. Something that somebody else said was that it's important to pay back. I think it was maybe Ysha. When you are blessed with money, it's important to give back. And this is something I have found in my own practice as well, where if I need money, I'll like do a spell, and whatever between like what it needs to take care of and like putting things away in savings and, doing all the adult things that we have to do. If there is excess left over, I will give it all away because what is given away returns to you sevenfold. That's something that is like true in my religious framework. I think it's something that's true outside of the religious framework. And so giving that back to like your community, I give back money to local food pantries because of a relationship I have with a particular saint, and even like monetarily elsewhere, like putting that money towards political activism, like in your local communities. I mean, there's so many things you can do to like enrich the area around you. And I think like your local spirits and even spirits on your team see that, and they see how you're trying to use what they've given you to make the world better, and so they will give more to you, right? This idea of being like a good well, okay, I can't think of the words. We're gonna stop there. The last thing is this idea of like quick and fast money versus a long-term money goal. There's a place for both within magic. Like sometimes you do just need quick and fast money because something happened, like you blew a tire and it takes like $800, right? That happened to me recently. It was horrible. But like that's different. But generally, like my framework when it comes to money is trying to like create a long-term plan that will allow me to be stable over time. And that requires like changing your relationship with money. And it may even require like putting some boundaries in place, right? Like making a budget, sticking to it, all those things. Personally, in my experience, I work really closely with Saturn when it comes to money for those boundaries, to, like hold me accountable to what I said I was going to do. And because Saturn is like very slow moving, it very much is like you will slowly be gaining money because of this like shift in perspective around money. But that's everything I had to say.
Okay, I know we're out of time because some of us have to go, so I'll just share mine really quickly. I definitely won't be able to get to all my techniques today, but as far as money magic goes, I agree with everything you guys said. I'm not going to reiterate it because I know we're on a time crunch. I swear by many money bowls. I do money bowls all the time, work with them on Thursday, of course, working with Jupiter. I petition Jupiter, so usually when I do that, I use a blue candle, nutmeg, cedar, and then I put Jupiter symbols on the candle and then write my petition out, and then I burn it with the candle. So definitely doing a lot of Jupiter work. I think Venus is also great to work with for money. But yeah, I agree with all the things about like building wealth versus quick, fast money. One of the unique things that I do, though, that I did really want to talk about is I have this magical entity that I've never talked about before. And she is a crow and she is scrappy as fuck. And her sole purpose, the servitor's sole purpose, is to bring me treats and treasures. Like she just brings me little treats all the time. And usually it's in the form of like a $20 bill here, maybe a little, a little treat over here. But I love working with her because she's so scrappy and she finds just from all the crevices of the world, she finds all these little treats and treasures for me. So I recommend getting a little, servitor set up for yourself. But yeah, she's my favorite thing to work with when it comes to like money and luck in particular, because I don't really have to actively do anything except maintain the relationship I have with her and just continue that, like giving her offerings and, continuing on. And then she just, we'll do a ritual and she'll come fly and sit on my shoulder and then we'll have little whatever. Anyway, so that's my method that I really enjoy.
That gave me a very good idea though, because actually right next to me is a magpie bird. And there are a lot of sayings in German that magpies steal. So, maybe that spirit is still there in that little stuffed bird. We will see.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love it. Yeah, I picked the crow image specifically because crows, first of all, are attracted to shiny things. And second of all, they are scrappy. They can go find anything out of any crevice. And that's exactly what I wanted her to do. So, yeah. I just wanted to say thank you all so much for being on this panel today. This was fabulous. I am so excited for future videos. I don't know if it's going to be on this channel or if it's going to be on someone else's channel. We'll have to try to figure that out. This is something we want to do on a regular basis, but for everyone watching this video, the hardest part about these panels is really coordinating everyone's schedule, not only being available on the same day, but also across all of our time zones, being able to be present. There were a couple practitioners that wanted to do this today, but were not able to because of schedule conflict. So we'll try our best to get a part 2 out as soon as possible, but it really just depends on scheduling. But thank you all again so much for being here. This was so fabulous. Also,
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. And to everybody, Aster and Astra, Justin, Ysha, all of you who I haven't gotten to meet before in person, is really wonderful to get to interact with you outside of the internet, texting and all that.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. It was amazing.
Agreed.
Thank you.
I'm going to have everyone's stuff linked below in the description box, of course. So please, please, please check out all of these creators on your screen because we all do fabulous stuff in our own little niches of the internet. So I hope you all have a blessed day and we'll see you for part 2 somewhere. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.